And now, a continuation of Quantum Gate by Jane E. Hawkins, as read atop the toilet by the Plurality Report. Alrighty. Chapter 32. The mess hall entrance irised open, and a chorus of voices tumbled in, followed by what remained of Phoenix Company, with the exception of Private Michaels. Hynek saw Dr. Mirren, colored, then saw Griffin. He elbowed Lopez. The rest of the group noticed, looked over, and fell silent. After a moment, Castle walked forward and looked Griffin in the eye. "Is it true?" Griffin didn't understand her for a second. Is what true? Is the Earth going to die? Is Saunders running scared? Then he realized what she must be saying and sighed. "About Alonzo and Tish?" The tall woman nodded. "Yes." Castle closed her eyes tightly. Wayland and Lopez came up on either side of her. Wayland put a hand gently on her elbow, and Castle looked at her. "Griffin says they're dead," said Castle. Wayland shuddered, then hugged Castle. Griffin watched and wondered what he had missed. Which one was Castle grieving? Hynek broke the silence. "Michael says there are SD devices on our CO suits." "I haven't looked for them," said Griffin. But Andrews didn't deny it. Hynek looked at Dr. Mirren. "Do you think that's right? That there are SDs on—" "No, I mean right!" Hynek sounded angry. "I mean, should we have self-destruct devices on our suits?" Dr. Mirren gave him a surprised glance, and Griffin knew she hadn't thought the boy would ever have the nerve to interrupt her. "I can't answer that question. My job is to save lives. That's what I try to do." "Could you save anyone who's been exposed to the atmosphere around here?" "The original UN survey team said it couldn't be done." "Well, what do you think?" She paused and took a deep breath. "I don't argue with orders." "Where's Alvarez?" Lopez demanded. "They shipped him Earthside," Mirren said. "Did you see them do it?" Instead of answering, the doctor stood and picked up her tray. The platoon members watched her dump her tray into the recycler and head for the door. "Dr. Mirren," said Castle. The doctor turned, her face very blank. "Yes?" "When will you release the bodies for services?" "I already have. They will be transported back to Earth this evening. The Colonel will hold services in the briefing room at 2000 hours. If anyone wishes to view the bodies for a final goodbye, they can go to the Quantum Gate afterward." "How do they—" Castle paused and swallowed hard. "How do they look?" Dr. Mirren looked puzzled. "Look? They look— Oh, you're worried that it might be upsetting to see them?" Castle nodded. "They look, unhappy. There is nothing worse than that." "Thank you." Dr. Mirren nodded to the private and was gone, the door hissing shut behind her. The rest of the platoon got their dinners. Usually they spread out through the room in twos and threes, chatting and harassing each other. Tonight, they huddled silently around one table, not even criticizing the food as they ate. Griffin sat amid them, wondering where Michaels was, but afraid to ask. He had worried about whether to wear his dress uniform to the service. There was probably a rule about it somewhere, but he didn't bother to look it up. Tish and Alonzo deserved what honor he could give them, so he put on the snug-fitting clothes and left the billet. He wasn't the only one who had made the decision. Wayland, Castle, and Hynek were just ahead of him going into the lift. They nodded and made room for him as the doors began to close. Castle and Hynek had also chosen the dress uniform. Wayland looked like she was sleepwalking. Griffin glanced at her, saw dilated pupils, and realized Dr. Mirren must have given her something. The rest of the company was already there as they came into the briefing room. Saunders, Andrews, and Cranshaw stood at the front of the room, looking quiet and stern. As Griffin slipped into a seat beside Michaels, he thought the two UN men looked like classic fire and brimstone preachers getting set to make their parishioners see the wages of sin. Hellfire indeed. This planet full of poison and bugs was all hellfire. Griffin or anyone else needed. Saunders cleared his throat, and the room became intensely silent. Even Michaels stilled his usual restless movements. "We are gathered here to pay our last respects to two fine young men. I was not privileged to know them personally, but I know their records." He looked slowly around the room as though challenging them to deny him his right to speak. "They were dedicated and brave soldiers determined to give service back to the world that birthed them, and they paid the highest price any one of us can pay." He paused and looked down, then back at the platoon. "I honor their courage. I ask you to honor it as well by continuing in your fine work on this most important of missions, the task of saving Earth itself. I have sent in my recommendation that both receive the Youthant Award for distinguished service in the cause of world peace. Sergeant?" Cranshaw stood and walked forward. She faced them and planted herself with her hands behind her back. Her face was very white. "You are one of the finest platoons I've had the privilege to lead. We will miss our comrades deeply. Alonzo was a talented pilot, and his sharp sense of humor helped us through many rough spots. Tish had a knack for knowing when someone needed a helping hand. They were assets to all of us, both as a platoon and as human beings." She was silent a moment. Griffin's throat felt tight. He heard someone sniff and glanced over to see tears running down Castle's face. To his surprise, Michaels also had a shiny streak on his cheek, and Hawkins was crying even more openly than Castle. "Does anyone wish to speak a few words before we proceed to the gate?" Wayland rose. Her voice shook and squeaked. Griffin could barely hear what she said. Something about Alonzo, but more about Tish. Michaels rose and told a somewhat cleaned-up version of the time they had all been hauled up for curfew violations. Hawkins spoke of meeting Alonzo's family. Castle talked about the time Tish had beaten her at Skyball. Griffin tried to think of something he could say, but nothing came to mind. He kept thinking of his father's funeral, with his mother's stream of tears and his sister cold as ice. The services had been Gaia, and he'd been angry at his mother for that. Still, he knew that even though his father was not of that faith, Dad would not have objected to Mom choosing whatever service would comfort her most. A few minutes of silence passed. Cranshaw looked at Saunders, who nodded. "Transport to Earth will commence in 15 minutes. Anyone wishing to pay final respects or to be present at transport may come with us now." Saunders and Andrews led the way, with Cranshaw following close behind. The platoon rose as one and filed out. Wayland silently turned into the hallway toward the lift as they passed. Hynek followed her. The rest of the platoon continued on toward the quantum gate. Griffin hesitated outside the door. It closed behind Michaels, and he was left alone in the corridor. He'll stop dreaming. No more dreams for Alonzo and Tish. In med school, someone had said that 3 days without REM sleep was sufficient to induce psychosis in most humans. How could they do without dreams? Griffin shook himself as he heard the gate start to hum from the other side of the door. He walked toward it, the door opened, and he entered. 2 figures lay on the platform. Alonzo's face was contorted, the dark skin twisted as though he might shout at any second. Tish looked vastly and terribly surprised. The huge crystal flower petals of the gate rose around them, and the gate's roar intensified. Bubbles of light streamed outward, streamed toward the triangle set into the ceiling. Less than a minute later, it was over. The oblong crystals opened, and the bodies were gone. Griffin blinked, his vision clouded with after-images of the glowing lights. Charlie Becker stood against the far wall, fiddling with the bank of controls. Becker claimed that he didn't understand how the gate could transport anything, but it clearly did. Griffin thought about the men appearing back on Earth, maybe in the same hangar they'd left a short time ago. He remembered their faces. He started to walk out, stopped in mid-step, and Hynek ran into him. The kid mumbled an apology, then continued on as Griffin looked at the gate's platform again. Sarge said that the atmosphere of AJ-3905 could eat your face. Andrews said the SDs prevented a painful death. The SDs were only activated when you were exposed to the outside air. A chemical stew that could eat your face would do it whether you were alive or not. Why had Tish and Alonzo looked okay? Chapter 33. The entire platoon, except for Wayland, was in the enlisted lounge. Sarge produced the first bottle. To Griffin's surprise, Hawkins produced a second. No one was surprised when Michaels left briefly and returned with 2 more. They tried to do the wake right. They told stories from the old days and played a little skyball and drank heavily. Yet none of them seemed really able to let go. Griffin wondered if they all felt the way he did, so dazed by the events that alcohol made no real difference. Cranshaw left comparatively early, and they all knew she was releasing them to let down their hair without the Sarge around. They protested in a formal way, telling her to stay, but she didn't. After the door closed behind her, there was a short silence. They were clustered around several tables pulled together. "Okay, Michaels. Give," said Hawkins. Michaels folded his arms. "What are you talking about?" "Tell us what happened." Michaels just looked at him. "Michaels, we need to know. We deserve to," said Castle. Michaels put his face into his hands. Griffin watched him, puzzled. "What's he doing?" "Michael doesn't cover his face. He puts it in yours." Michaels leaned back, looking distant. "Dr. Marks called in our team. She was cheerful as hell, but didn't tell us what we were going to do. She just gave Tish the coordinates and we headed out. She had me, Alonzo, and Alvarez sitting around watching a clip of some geological formation. I don't know what that was about. I was nearly freaking asleep when Tish started yelling about flying bugs. Then we got tossed around a lot. Alvarez was on weapons. I heard him start firing, but he stopped suddenly. You'll have to ask him why." Griffin made a noise, and Michaels looked at him, first in annoyance, then his expression grew very still. "What?" he demanded. "They shipped Alvarez Earthside after we got back. He's not here anymore," Griffin said it for all of them to hear, but he kept his eyes on Michael's face. "He's not here to ask anymore." Michaels was still for a moment, then for another moment his lips formed soundless curses. He stopped abruptly and put his shoulders back, pushing it all away. "Okay, that's something for later," he breathed deeply. "We went down. It was pretty harsh. One pontoon ripped loose, and Alvarez got knocked out. Then we were stopped." He paused to take a deep breath. Nobody said anything. "The doc, she didn't seem upset," he continued. "She jumped into her envirosuit, slapped her helmet on, and was cycling out through the airlock before any of us knew what was happening." "She jumped out into a mess of bugs?" said Hynek. "Listen, I don't know what she ran into. I wasn't anywhere near a screen. I just know she was gone." Michaels looked around as though daring them to believe it. No one spoke. "So there was something wrong with Alvarez. He was still down, but his suit was okay. Understand?" He waited, staring at them until one by one they nodded. "Okay," he said. "Tish said I should cover them on weapons while he and Alonzo went out to help the doc. Made sense to me at the time." Michaels stopped and stared up, his face very still. The moment stretched on a long time. They could all see him reliving the crash. "Come on, guy," said Hynek softly. Yeah, don't short circuit," Castle said. Michael shook himself and looked back at the waiting platoon. Tish and Alonzo cycled out. Alvarez was groaning on the floor. I stepped over him and I got on the weapons. The screens were all jazzed. I couldn't see much. Flashes of wacky stuff, green stuff, then bugs, then green stuff, then nothing. I could hear Tish or Alonzo firing. Alonzo started yelling. I got a clear sight long enough to nail one bug, and then it was all quiet. Too quiet. I couldn't raise Tish, Alonzo, or Dr. Marks. The ship's AP was flashing in and out of existence, but told me that the self-destruct units on Tish and Alonzo had activated. That was the first time I heard about them. I tried to get the skiver up, but it wasn't moving, so I called for an assist and slapped an eddy patch on Alvarez. There was a long silence. Then Hawkins spoke abruptly. You didn't go out to try to help Tish and Alonzo? His face was accusing. His hands formed fists. Michael stared at him silently for a heartbeat. Man, did you hear me? They were dead! His voice rose to a near shout. You know they were dead! The SD units activated on both and made sure they died. Michaels leaned forward in his chair, his hands flattened to the table. He started to stand up. Hawkins glared back at him. Michaels, power down, said Castle, her tough face disgusted. Hawkins, you're going too far. Hawkins looked at her, his face a study in mixed emotions. Then he nodded tightly. He looked at Michaels. You're right. Sorry, guy. Michaels blinked rapidly and relaxed. Unlock and unload. We're all freaking out around this stuff. No joke, said Castle. I'm going to be running replays of this in my dreams. Don't count on it, said Michaels. Castle looked puzzled, but he went on talking as though she hadn't reacted. I could swear Marks knew something was going to happen. I don't know what, but this whole business is clogging my tubes. How did the bugs get past the detectors? Said Lopez. Good question. You answer that and I'll be a happy grunt. Don't count on it, Castle said, but nobody laughed. Chapter 34. Griffin had pulled off his dress uniform and slid into a more comfortable set of khakis when the door chimed. A minute later, Michaels sauntered in, thumbs hooked on the belt of his fatigue pants. Hey man, how you doing? Griffin looked at him tiredly. I've been better, actually, he said. Yeah, me too. Hey, what's Saunders want with you? Griffin shook his head. You'll like this. He wanted me to keep an eye on you and report back with anything funny. Krishna on a Christmas tree, that's typical. Saunders, what a brownie hound. So what'd you tell him? Hell, what do you think? I didn't tell him anything. Michaels nodded, but Griffin wasn't sure he believed him. Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Yeah? Well, listen here. I need to talk to you more. Sit down. Michaels looked surprised, but sat on the bunk. Griffin scooted the chair close. Okay, I've been doing some thinking. Don't make any smart-ass remarks, Michaels. Leaning forward, he laid it on the line. Everything he had learned that didn't make sense to him, and everything he conjectured. Michaels listened in silence, his eyes never moving from Griffin's face. When Griffin finally sat back, he felt drained, as though he had lanced something and let all the pressure out. Michaels raised his eyebrows. I knew there was a reason I was wasting my time with you, he said, and for the first time in days he gave Griffin a real smile, one that lit up the hard planes of his face. That business about getting the nurse to scan the flower, that's pretty good. Well, gee, thanks, Griffin retorted. At least it's trying to get some kind of proof, because without that, you've got squat, Michaels, and you know it. Maybe, maybe not. Michaels was silent for a moment. When you were flying out there to get us, you got attacked, right? By one of the flying things. Yeah, so? Okay, bear with me. When you fly, you're using a top hat. We use those same kind of top hats in Belgium. He paused. This time, Griffin just watched him, and finally Michaels said, We thought we were going in to take out a bunker of common soil snipers. And I got this weird feeling one time, just this thought, so I took off my top hat. He stopped and took a deep breath. His voice dropped to a whisper. Do you remember the assassination of the Trans-Progressionist Party president and his family? Yes. Remember that picture, the little girl holding her doll just kind of lying there? Griffin remembered the picture, perhaps the most powerful propaganda item ever used against common soil. It showed the president's 5-year-old daughter clutching her doll, except that the doll's head and the little girl's chest had been blown away. I saw it happen, man, Michaels said so softly Griffin had to lean forward to catch his words. It wasn't common soil that did it. Griffin stared, and Michaels nodded once. Okay, he continued, his voice almost normal but still low. On patrol today, 3 things. The good doctor did not eat it in a bug fight. She was 10 clicks off the flight path. She knew what she was doing, and I'm telling you, man, she walked away. Now somebody altered the PAC-Trans data. My guess is it was Andrews. I just can't figure out why. Griffin nodded. You want me to believe that Dr. Marks deliberately walked away into an atmosphere that can kill you? Walked away from her work, from her family, all that stuff? Jeez, Michaels. Griffey, please, just give me a chance here. Okay, Griffin said finally. For argument's sake, I'll buy it. Michaels nodded. The second thing. After we were down, I took over the bubble. The screens, the VR display in there, it kept doing some strange shit, man. I mean, it's like I'd be seeing brown hills, all that ugly shit out there, and then, I don't know, man. He shook his head. It was like someone had programmed in a picture, you know? A real old one with blue sky and trees, green stuff, like a painting. But just a flash, and then it'd be gone again. Griffin wet his lips. Yeah, he said. But the growing cold in his stomach didn't let him say any more. And the third thing, Michaels continued, just before his suit was breached, Alonzo was screaming for us not to shoot. He was saying, they're human. Don't fire. They're people. Griffin's guts hurt. That I gotta get out of here ache that he knew so well, and he started to lose his temper. Then why didn't you report it? He demanded. Are you really that stupid? If it's true, do you think Saunders doesn't know it? He'd just give me crap about VR addressing errors. But you know what really cuts it, Griffey. It had to be on the PAC-Trans because that sucker records everything, and they're claiming it's not there. His eyes narrowed. I'm telling you, man, the VR is not accurate, and they're lying about PAC-Trans, and they lied to us about the self-destruct units too. They didn't lie, Griffin said. They just didn't tell us. It's called a sin of omission, Michaels said. Do you realize that they are doing what they are doing with those SD units on our suits? He didn't give Griffin a chance to answer. They say it's to protect us from a protracted and painful death on the surface of AJ-3905. They have rigged out envirosuits with self-destruct modules. What triggers this wonderfully humane action? Any breach of the suit, right? Including voluntarily taking off the helmet. Even a voluntary suit breach would trigger the SD. Wait a minute. Why would anyone want to take off a top hat? I asked myself the same question in Belgium, and listen, if they are not giving us a VR compatibility drug, then why was it I was able to find an antidote? Michaels held up a foiled packet containing 3 white pills and looked at it smugly. Where did you... No, Griffin said, interrupting himself. I don't want to know. Michaels put the pills on the table. The 2 men stared at them. Another station? Griffin said after a long time. No way of knowing. One mechanic? Don't know why. Gate tech can't figure out why the gate works. Michael shrugged. Can't answer that one either. Maybe he's asking the wrong questions or expecting it to do something it's not designed to do. And Griffin remembered Charlie Becker saying that they were not necessarily on AJ-3905. Trinidad, crazy little tech had muttered, or Sumatra. Strange plant life, Michael said. Don't know, man. Sunlight. Maybe, maybe not. Michaels paused, then said, You know Charlie Becker? That wimp gate tech? Griffin nodded. I talked to him tonight. He says the gate was only used once today, to transport Tish and Alonzo. Griffin stared at him blankly for a moment, then it hit him. Then where's Alvarez? He said. Where do you think? Michael slammed both palms against the table. There's one person on board who knows the answers, and who has to tell us. Yeah? Griffin said. What are you gonna do? Ask Saunders? No, Michael said, standing. No, I'm coming back for you around 0300 hours. Central processing's deserted then. He looked down at Griffin. Under the International Information Act, you have a right to access your personnel file at any time. He paused. So we're going to have a little talk with the beast. Chapter 35. Griffin was desperately tired when Michaels left, soul-deep weary. He stripped to his underwear and didn't even bother putting the clothes into the recycler. Leaving them in an untidy heap on the floor, he crawled into his bunk and closed his eyes. The dark tide of sleep swept under him. "Hey, Griffey," a voice in his room. Not the AP's wake-up call. "Who?" Griffin sat up. Michaels was standing over him, with a hand on his shoulder. "Come on," he said. "Wake up, it's time to go." Griffin stood and pulled on his fatigue pants. He felt like he had just closed his eyes. How could it be 0300 already? Michaels headed out. Griffin followed. The lift sounded impossibly loud in the quiet of the night, and their footsteps seemed to echo. He expected a guard around every bend and jumped when a ventilator clanked as he was going by. However, they didn't see a single human being during their short walk to the computer center. The computer's AI greeted them as they walked in the door, its huge and inhuman face hanging in the air before them. "Hello, Privates Michaels and Griffin. How may I assist you?" Griffin stopped in his tracks, staring up and feeling like it could really read every one of his thoughts. Some people said a true AI could do the next best thing. With the right sensory gear, they could detect extremely minute changes in body temperature and scent. With that face looking down on him, he found stories that he had previously dismissed as paranoid a lot more plausible. What was he doing here? Michael said, "Ask for access to your personal file." Griffin looked at him, looked back at the AI, and squeaked out, May I have access to my personal records?" He swallowed. "Please?" Michaels gave him a disgusted look. The AI didn't bother to answer. It rotated its bodiless face toward a display screen on Griffin's left, and his records began to scroll by. "Medical record," said Michaels briskly. "Search medications, please." The record display blurred, then paused. "Read line 3. 300 cc myadona nitrate delivered daily," said the AI. "Close file. Open my personnel file, please. Search medications." Michael scanned the display briefly, then said, "Read line 5. 300 cc myadona nitrate delivered daily." Michaels looked out from under his eyebrows at Griffin. "You taking any medication?" "No." "Me neither." He signaled the computer to close the files. "With that high a quantity, they're probably delivering it in the water supply." He turned toward the AI. "Is that true? Is my myadona medication being delivered in the water supply?" "Negative," said the AI, and Griffin could have sworn that it sounded amused. "Is myadona delivered to everyone on this station?" Griffin asked. "That is not a pertinent question," the AI said. Michaels faced the face. "Okay, how about this? What is the myadona prescribed for?" "Sleep disorders," the AI said. "Are there any indications in my record of sleep disorders?" Michael said. "There are indications going back 3 months." "That's bullshit! I've never had problems." "Who entered that information into the record?" Griffin asked. "Access denied." Griffin took a deep breath. "Okay. Who entered that information into my record?" "Access denied." Michaels looked like he was about to shout, but Griffin put a hand on his shoulder. "Wait. Think it through. If you're right, then..." He turned to the AI. "Does myadona disrupt REM sleep?" "Affirmative," the AI said. "Is myadona shown to enhance VR compatibility?" "Affirmative." "Who else is getting it then?" Michaels demanded. "Access denied." Griffin could have sworn that the AI sounded smug. Wait, Griffin said. "On this station, how are medications administered?" "Access denied." "Okay, how are my medications administered?" "Orally," the AI said promptly. "Great," said Griffin with satisfaction. "And it's not in the water, so it has to be in the food. And the mess hall AP identifies each of us when we order, and the veggie machine is programmed to supply each dose. Am I correct?" "You are correct." Griffin grinned. About Myadona's side effects. Does the drug taste bad? It is so described, the AI said. Uh-huh. And is its active ingredient formulated with something that dulls the taste buds? There was a moment of silence, then the AI said, Affirmative. Griffin's grin spread. Michaels, he said, I think we owe Cookie an apology. Michaels didn't find it amusing. The hell we do. He narrowed his eyes and then said, Okay, let's try this one. Why is there only one mechanic at this station? That is not pertinent to your private personnel file, the AI said tolerantly. Access denied. I'm a pilot, Griffin said. It's pertinent if I have to go up in a skiver that isn't adequately maintained. So why is there only one mechanic? Access denied, the AI repeated. If and when you go up in an inadequately maintained skiver, and if and when a problem arises therefrom, then the information will be pertinent to your file. Griffin took a deep, frustrated breath and was about to let it out when Michael said quickly, Where's Private Alvarez? The silence stretched for a moment, then the AI said, Access denied. Was he shipped back to Earth? Michaels persisted. Access denied. Is he still on this planet? Griffin demanded. Access denied. Is he in sickbay? Michaels pressed. Access denied. Is he alive? Griffin asked, and once again the AI skipped a beat, barely perceptible unless you were listening for it, unless you knew that AIs never needed time to think, to formulate a response. And, once again, the AI said, Access denied. Michaels cursed violently, but Griffin simply stood, looking at the green face of the AI. It looked back at him without expression. The world seemed quite suddenly like an insubstantial place. Is he alive? The AI had let a moment pass, a bare nanosecond. Access denied. The session went rapidly downhill, almost as if the AI had grown bored with their questions and just wanted them to go away. Griffin shook away his momentary feeling of unease. He and Michaels asked about the gate, about the green visions both had seen in the Bubbles VR screens, and about the Pac-Trans record, about Alonzo's astonishing words spoken before he died. The AI denied access, refused pertinence, and responded with flat, endless, and negative politeness to anything they asked that did not show up in their personnel files. Finally, Michaels spread his arms in frustrated resignation and walked away. Griffin watched him go. He had long ago lost any sense of amusement or adventure, and he felt alone and under observation, standing in the quiet of the computer center after the door closed. The AI's face still hung in the air, but did not seem to be active. What did it make of this? Part of him wanted to ask, to explore the obvious intelligence behind that quiescent green face, to see if it would give him answers. But a larger part of him shivered and quailed and didn't want to know anything. He was afraid, terribly, primevally afraid, of the AI, of the mission, of Michaels, even of himself. He was a private in the Beatrice Military Division. He was indentured. They could kill him, legally, for no reason at all. He backed out, and the eyes of the beast never moved. He dripped sweat as he took the lift back down. Too much was happening. Mysterious gadgets and bugs and platoon members dying and a CO pushing at him and thoughts of Jenny haunting him all the way through it. And where was Alvarez? He felt as if he was about to just lose it, just crack apart and never hold his head up ever again. Michael's door was tightly closed as he walked past toward his own room. He closed his own door, then grimly put himself through a series of exercises that at least changed the odor of his sweat. When the trembling in his body changed from fear to exhaustion, he took a shower. For the first time, he didn't question the water flowing over his back or feel guilty about it. He just enjoyed it. The narrow bed called to him as he came out, still slightly damp from the hot air dryer. He crawled in and was asleep before he had a chance to ask himself if he would be able to. Chapter 36. Sarge was standing over him. "Private Griffin." "Griffin!" She clapped her hands twice. He grunted. "Wake up, soldier. You're needed in the briefing room immediately." She started to walk away, and his eyes started to drift closed. She turned, saw him, walked back, and pointed into his face. "Don't go back to sleep." "Yes, Sergeant." "Good. Get down there as soon as you can." Only Hawkins was missing when he arrived in the briefing room. Andrews, Cranshaw, and Saunders stood at the front of the room, looking at the platoon as they settled themselves. The UN men were in their full-bore monkey suits again. Griffin sat next to Michaels as usual, but didn't look at him. No one was talking, not even to complain about getting rousted early for a briefing. Maybe they were all as dazed as he was. Hawkins came in less than a minute later. Lieutenant Andrews stepped forward. Can I have your attention, please?" He turned to his left. "Colonel Saunders." Colonel Saunders stepped forward. His face was tight. Griffin wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but he thought the edge of fear was stronger today. "Yesterday, a survey flight led by Dr. Marks was attacked." Drew heard an odd catch in Saunders' voice, a not quite stop before he said the last word. A lie. Saunders had just lied. "There have been 2 fatalities," said Saunders. "Dr. Marks is missing. Computer model display, please." So they still hadn't found her body. How could they miss it? She'd been wearing a CO suit and a UN uniform, both of which contained materials that ought to be detectable at a distance. Even if she had been ripped out of both by the bugs, wouldn't they have found some traces? An AP appeared and said, "Playback ready." The screen filled with an image of a winged bug. In general shape, it looked much like what Griffin had seen yesterday. Gray body, green spiky wings, twice its height, 2 arms, 3 legs, and a face like an angry dragonfly. Drew frowned. It seemed to him that this bug had a lot more detail than yesterday's. Was that just because the attack happened so fast? There had also been something else just as that thing blew up. A flash of white. A song from childhood. He couldn't quite bring it to mind. "We have a new bug type," said Saunders. "This is a ComSend report from the VR mission recorders. This new class is considered very dangerous. The added mobility is obviously a factor as well. The VRDB has been updated with this new model so your heads-up displays will reflect the proper image. These new bugs have been rated 89A for combat efficiency." Griffin blinked. That news cleared the fog in his head, at least for the moment. 89A? I'm only a 92 in full armor. We were damn lucky to nail that thing yesterday. New directives from ComSend state: no skiver deployment when bug type F1 combatants are present. Huh? What were they going to do? Send grunts out on foot after bugs that could fly? That made no sense. Was it because of that skiver losing pillow? And finally, there have been some reports of VR displays malfunctioning. It seems some bugs are being shown as humanoid. Michaels made a sharp but quickly halted movement. Griffin felt the blood drain out of his face. Last night, Michaels had claimed that Alonzo saw the bugs as human. Display malfunctions. He'd seen some on his own flight. Not bugs as humans, but the gray and brown landscape suddenly flickered into green, almost as though there was normal vegetation down there. So, everyone, please review your online manuals and EnviroSuit procedures and VR error addressing. That, ladies and gentlemen, will be all. Saunders stared coldly at Griffin. Private Griffin, will you please be so kind as to join me in my quarters at 1000 hours? Griffin nodded uncomfortably, and Saunders left. Did the CO expect a report on Michael's subversive activities? Griffin looked at Michaels, who raised one eyebrow sardonically. Lieutenant Andrews motioned to Cranshaw, who stood and faced them. Okay, folks, new sim runs today. You've been so gung-ho that I put in for more bays yesterday. They came in overnight. We don't have to split up anymore. This is critical stuff, so we'll start right after breakfast. Hynek groaned, as did Castle. But Nit, Cranshaw didn't crack a smile. I'm not planning on losing any more of you. You get in here at 0700 and you work. She was angry, not at them, near as Griffin could tell, as they filed out, just angry. As he waited in line for his turn at the mess hall AP, his stomach churned. What did Saunders want this time? Judging by his CO's face, he was in trouble. The only question was, what kind and how much? What makes those new bugs so blasted tough? 89A, said Castle and shook her head. Sure they can fly, but the orthotype can hop so high they might as well be flyers, and no one's ranking them like that. Ever heard of an ortho making a skiver lose pillow? Said Michaels. The table went silent for a moment. Griffin ate another piece of his flattened waffle. His mind was still moving like mud. Flying bugs, detailed wings, Maidana, Alvarez. He heard the mess hall door open behind him, but didn't look up. Hawkins was facing the door. John! Hey, come over here. Got a question for you, said Hawkins. Griffin turned to see the smiling mechanic approaching. Sure thing. What can I do for you? How'd that bug make a skiver lose pillow? John De Silva's smile dimmed only slightly. Don't know. They haven't given me the rec yet. Any guesses? Well, a laser cannon to the out trigger might do it. Get serious. The bugs don't have more weapons than what we were born with. Sure, but like I said, I just don't know. De Silva smiled again and went to get his food. Hawkins made room for him at the table. You must be pleased that we won't be using the skivers for a while, said Michaels. De Silva shrugged. Don't make no never mind to me. But you have to maintain them. If we aren't going out, then you've got less work. The mechanic laughed. Oh, those babies are easy. No problem at all. Don't you have problems with corrosion? Corrosion? No. No problem at all. But the atmosphere has a lot of chlorine. That ought to eat things up good, said Hawkins. De Silva shrugged again. Search me. Those babies come back clean. Haven't had to replace so much as a single fitting. Maybe that's because we aren't on an alien planet, said Michaels. We're on Earth, and they're lying to us for some reason. The rest of the platoon tensed, but De Silva didn't seem to notice. He stared at Michaels, then shook his head. Boy, you've been talking to Charlie too much. Charlie knows the gate, and he says some strange things. He purely does, doesn't he? Maybe he's even right once in a while, but I tell you, we are not on Earth. How do you know? I already told you, no corrosion. Does that sound like Earth to you? He laughed. Griffin blinked, and then he got it. Respiratory problems were one of the most common ailments in the world, just below water deprivation. Jenny had lost a patient to hyperneumonia her first time on ER duty. She cried in his arms that night, describing the young woman gasping and bubbling out her last breaths. Jenny in his arms. Jenny. Maybe the skivers have just got some good material coatings, said Michaels. And I wouldn't know a coating if I saw one? De Silva laughed again. Listen, boy, maybe I ain't the highest power laser in the army, but I do know my skivers. You rest yourself about that stuff. We'd have more trouble with pitting if we were in Antarctica. We are not on Earth. They finished their breakfasts in almost complete silence. Chapter 37. Sarge had implied she was going to run them ragged in Sim, and she was true to her word, like always. From the time Griffin pulled on his top hat until she gave them a break an hour later, the onslaught of simulated bugs was relentless. She wouldn't even let folks back out when they got killed, but instead required they continue watching the current scenario play out. Just because you messed up, you think that means you don't have anything more to learn? Try that on your mother. Her anger was colder now, more focused but still intense. Did she know something they didn't? Griffin's head felt more clear with nearly every run. He got nailed over and over in the first 2 runs, as did most of the platoon, but by the 3rd run they were reacting faster. Sarge's voice came over the top hat's comm line. Okay, crew, now that you're waking up, We're going to get tactical for a while." The bugs began with a diversionary side attack followed by a full assault in formation. The first time the entire platoon was wiped out. Griffin was stunned. This is why they got ranked 89A. Was this based on actual observations? If so, someone had known about those flying bugs a lot longer than they were admitting. Yet if this attack style wasn't real, why would they bother with it under Sim? After that fiasco, the platoon began to sharpen up. Griffin was finally able to nail a few bugs of his own. God, it was good to see those things blow up. He heard Hynek whoop repeatedly. Michaels didn't say a word. "Okay, folks," said Sarge. "Take a rest." The Sim universe went dark, and Griffin's top hat lifted off. He almost pulled it back down over his head and went at it again. He felt great. He didn't need a rest. He could do this all day long. He heard Castle grumble at Sarge, and figured she must feel the same way. But Sarge was powering down the equipment, looking more satisfied, but still too grim to challenge, even as a joke. Most of the platoon headed for the enlisted lounge. Castle tried to interest some of them in a game of poker, but she'd been winning too heavily lately. No one bit. Hawkins challenged her to skyball. She shrugged and accepted. Whalen and Griffin went back to quarters. He saw Captain George Chow's back retreating down the corridor as they came out the lift. What a relief. He'd missed him. As Whalen signaled her door open, Griffin nodded to her, but she either didn't notice or didn't feel like responding. He couldn't recall having heard her speak a word all day. The shock of losing her family had hit deep. The door to his room closed behind him, and the euphoria from Sim began to slip away. He sat in his chair, watching the feeling fade and realizing it was like coming down from a recreational drug. He could almost see his mood change by the minute, and then suddenly he knew. The top hats were a substitute for REM sleep. Humans had to have dreams, whether they remembered them or not. His dreams had been getting more thin and scattered ever since arriving on the base. The last 2 times he'd slept, he hadn't had any dreams. All VR-enhancing drugs repressed REM sleep, which was why they were so seldomly used. The hotshots must have figured out how to get the top hats to compensate for that. He could almost see how it might be done. He took the packet of pills from the counter in the bathroom and looked at them. An antidote. Did he believe that? He turned it in his hands. No labeling, not even code numbers. Could be anything. Sinus medicine, tranquilizer, speed. Yet he knew the shapes and colors of most common medicines. This wasn't quite like any of them. He set the packet down. Yes, he did believe Michaels, at least that far. He tapped Militerm for intra-base communication and called the lounge. Hynek said Michaels wasn't there. He tried his room but got no answer, probably wandering around seeing if he could get into more trouble. What if Michaels was also right about the accuracy of the VR? What did that mean? He claimed Alonzo said they were shooting at humans, yet De Silva was dead certain they weren't on Earth, and he'd made a good case for it. Let's say the images are doctored to make us happier about killing them. The locals are cute little bunnies instead of ugly bugs. That still didn't explain a mining operation with no miners, just soldiers. Pacifying the archipelago so the miners wouldn't get attacked? If so, it wasn't working very well, was it? The bugs, or whatever they were, had gotten tougher. Marks was gone, probably dead, but Michaels didn't seem to think so. The gate, the fear in Saunders' eyes, Alvarez, access denied. They all roiled around in his brain, and for the first time in his life, Drew Griffin began to think about not running away. Chapter 38. As he turned to the door, Militerm spoke. "Mail is waiting for you." He froze. Jenny. It had to be Jenny. He hesitated for only a second before sliding into the chair in front of the terminal. He took a deep breath, not knowing whether he felt fear or anticipation, but knowing only that, one way or another, this had to be resolved. Then he tapped the screen for the letter. Words scrolled up the screen. Notice: the following correspondence has been digitally obscured at the request of the sender. The notice faded and was replaced by Jenny's face, or rather half her face. The right side was heavily blurred. He couldn't quite see what was wrong, but it seemed obvious that her eye at least wasn't right. "Hi, Drew. How are you? I hope that you are doing well." "I'm doing good. We're all good here," she hesitated. I miss you. I'm worried about you. I hope that you are okay. They won't tell us anything, where you are. My therapist, Barbara, says that it's either Chile or Budapest. I try not to think about it very much." She gave a short laugh. "But I'm not having very much luck." She was starting to cry. You're on my mind all the time, as a matter of fact. Bet you don't have that problem." He touched the screen, touched the image of her bright hair. "Oh, Jenny, my brave, sweet Jenny. I still don't know what happened to me. I don't know what happened to us." She closed her eyes briefly and visibly forced herself to calm down. She looked out from the screen with an intent expression. "I want you to know that I don't blame you, and I wish that you don't blame yourself. Sometimes it just happens. Your mom is really worried, but I'm doing my best to make her feel better. I know that we can never be together after this, but that doesn't mean you can't come back and pick things up again. And I'm not saying that for you. I'm saying that for your mom and for me. It would help me a lot if you would come back home and start school again." He leaned forward, watching her dear and serious face. "I'm going to, in a year or so," she said. She didn't sound like she even believed that. He doubted that his mother did. "So, who knows, maybe I'll run into you on campus." Each word sent shock waves through him. She was so wounded, her body so broken, and yet this was still Jenny. He remembered her spirit, her determination, and wondered if maybe she might really be able to do it. I love you. I love you very much, and I'm going to miss you. Goodbye, Drew." She turned her head towards someone off camera, and Griffin saw where her right eye had been. An enormous, thick scar covered the entire area. A failed attempt to regrow the orb. Oh, Jenny. Sweet Jenny. "Could you turn off the tape?" she said. "I'm finished." The screen went blank. Tears streamed down his face, and he finally realized that he was going back to her. No matter what it took, he needed, finally, to go back, to stop running, to face his own life. He said as much immediately into Milaterm's mail reply module, letting the tears shine on his face, begging her to take him back, to wait for him until his enlistment term was up, and finally begging her to forgive him, as he had never in his life asked for forgiveness before. Jenny had a sense of ethics. She puzzled out what she felt was right, and then she kept to it. His mother was the same way. They weren't responsibilities to be run from, he thought. They were role models. To hold on to what you believe is right, to fight for it, was the only right way to live. Andrew Griffin finally took control of his own soul. Chapter 39. Griffin palmed his door closed and stood for a moment, staring at the doors of the other platoon members. Where to start? Michael still wasn't responding to a page, and with Alonzo gone, Griffin didn't quite know who to trust, at least not yet. Charlie Becker had told Michaels that the gate had only been used once yesterday to transport the bodies of Alonzo and Tish back to Earth. Dr. Mirren had said Alvarez was shipped home. Deep in thought, Griffin strode into the main corridor and almost collided with Marie Lucas. They both stared at each other, shocked. "Good Lord," the nurse said. "I tell you, I hadn't realized how much I'd gotten used to it being empty around here." She offered him a smile. "You damn near scared me ragged, soldier. You owe me a stiff cup of tea." Before he could respond, she took his arm and steered him toward the enlisted lounge. "Better hot water in here," she said, and laughed as though she had made a joke. Griffin didn't get it until they entered the room. A skyball game was in progress, 4 soldiers from Phoenix Company against some UN guards, and the room almost bounced with noise. The perfect cover for a quiet conversation, he realized as Marie Lucas picked out a table not too far from the game. She kept up a constant chatter about inconsequentialities. She made him get her a cup of tea from the AP, and when he put it down, she reached into her uniform pocket. "I carry my own sugar," she said. "Use up a lot of my mass allowance on it, but you can't beat the real thing, can you? Here, have some." She grabbed his palm and pressed a neat fold of paper into it. Griffin stared at it for a moment, then smiled and thanked her, and pretended to open up the packet and pour something into his tea. Then, letting his hands fall into his lap, he tucked the piece of paper into his own pocket. When he looked up again, Marie was regarding him seriously. "You got my life there, soldier boy," she said without a trace of humor. "Don't you go getting me killed." He covered her hand with his and squeezed, then drank off part of his tea. "One more thing," he said, and smiled as inanely as he could. Anyone watching would, he hoped, think he was flirting with the nurse. "Yeah?" "Alvarez." She blinked at him. "Georgetown came for him yesterday mid-afternoon. Said Saunders wanted him shipped back to Earth." She winked, her serious words at odds with the flirtatious expression on her face. Griffin hoped that his own play-acting was half as good as hers. "So Georgetown took him," he said. "Nah, that little phony wouldn't dirty his hands," she said with contempt. "He had a couple of UN guards with him. I stabilized the bed and they rolled him out." Griffin thought about that for a moment. "Did he say anything? Alvarez, I mean." "No, he was sleeping like a baby. He did wake up once, just after he got to sickbay. Said something to the doc, but I was busy at the med station and didn't hear what he said. And when I got back to him, he was sleeping again." "Sleeping," Griffin echoed. "Mira knocked him out?" Lucas opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I guess," she said after a minute. Griffin hesitated, looking at her, then took her hand in both of his and leaned forward. "Marie, listen. Private Michaels said he talked with Charlie Becker, the gate tech. Becker said the gate was only used once yesterday, to transport the bodies back to Earth." The nurse's hand lay still for a moment, then clenched. "Then where's Private Alvarez?" she said, and it wasn't a question. She pulled her hand away. "Go read that paper, soldier boy," she said quietly, "and then get rid of it." She pushed back her chair and stood. "I'm beside you," she said. "Don't forget that." Griffin nodded in thanks and headed straight for his billet. Chapter 40. The Jensen Ultra, being a top-flight diagnostic machine modified to help even a doofus figure out its scan, had helpfully provided not only the scan results but a paragraph at the bottom explaining those results. The paragraph talked about DNA sequences in mitochondria and what they both meant. It discussed everything it had done to try to match the genetic structure of the tiny Lily. It boasted about how it connected to the resident AI and searched its databases, and gloried in the announcement that it had finally made a full and complete identification of the material. The plant was, down to the tiniest twist of its DNA, inarguably a fine example of Lilium paradalinum, also known as the leopard lily, not a hybrid, but a species. And it had been entirely, irrevocably, and provably extinct for well over 75 years. Griffin frowned at these results. The lily was real. It existed right now, in the atrium, growing away. And he had taken one of its flowers to Marie Lucas, and she had held that real flower in her hand and fed that real flower into the Jensen Ultra, which proved it to be extinct. What the hell did that mean? He was going to put the report back in his pocket when he remembered Marie Lucas telling him that the piece of paper represented her life. He took the paper into the bathroom, turned on the tap in the sink, and let the water run down over the paper. The paper slowly shredded in his palm, and he watched the fibers slide down the drain, thinking about Miran and Georgetown and Private Alvarez. Access denied. He shook the last scraps of his hand off his hand and touched his cheek, feeling the precious dampness. And finally, he went to find Michaels, ready to accept what the man had been saying from the beginning. Something was wrong, desperately, seriously wrong, and if Griffin was going home to Jenny, he needed to figure this out. he needed, for her sake more than his, to keep himself safe. He queried the door to Michael's room, and to his surprise it didn't respond. Generally, a door would tell you whether the room was vacant or occupied, or whether its occupant just wanted to be alone. But Michael's door didn't say anything at all. Griffin actually put his knuckles to it and rapped, a solid, old-fashioned gesture that was soundlessly absorbed into the spectre stone. Nothing. Frowning, he looked at the door. Something was different. What was it? The same shape, the same sign, the same picture of Michael's in the ID slot. The sign said, "Deleted." Griffin stood still for a minute, refusing to process it. No. Deleted? He's been deleted? This must be a mistake. They killed him? I don't believe this. They killed him? He began pacing back and forth in front of the door, 2 steps forward, 2 back, stopped, and read the sign again. No, it didn't change. It continued to say the same thing. Deleted. Michael's had been deleted. As in dead. And he caught himself thinking, with wild fury, geez, just wait until I tell Michaels about this fuck-up. And an AP appeared before him, smooth and serious and oh so competent, and reminded him that he had an appointment with his CO, Griffin. Griffin stared at her a moment, then cursed and turned away. Saunders could wait. Griffin was going to talk to Charlie Becker. Chapter 41. They killed her, the gate text said raggedly. Griffin stared at him, shocked. It looked like Charlie Becker hadn't slept in days. Bloodshot eyes stared through the thick lenses. Killed who? Griffin said. Elizabeth, Charlie replied, choking. Oh, maybe they didn't pull the trigger. Maybe they didn't poison her or electrocute her or drown her. Charlie, or stab her or push her out an airlock, or Charlie, snap out of it, Griffin shouted. Oh. Becker turned away, fumbled for something in his pocket, and finally produced a tattered piece of cloth. He blew his nose into it and stuffed it back in his pocket. But they did kill her, he said, more calmly. They made her miserable. They really did. Whatever she did, it was because they gave her no choice. I know. Griffin remembered Dr. Marks in the hallway saying to Colonel Sanders, I don't know who I am anymore, and how can you know what we're doing is right? He put his hand on Becker's shoulder. Charlie, I believe you, he said. You do? Becker looked at him. I barely know whether to believe myself anymore. I think they killed my friend Michaels, Griffin said. I need your help, Charlie. Can you help me? Becker just turned away. What good would it do? Elizabeth is dead. Griffin felt a stab of impatience and pushed it away. Charlie, I need you to tell me about yesterday, he said. About the gate yesterday. How many times did you... One time, Becker said with weary flatness. Just one time. To move those 2 bodies. Bodies don't take as much energy as living people, you know, because you don't have to do redundancy checks so much. So it was pretty easy. Griffin bit his lip. Nothing else? No one living? 2 bodies, Becker repeated. Dead ones. I would have known. Griffin thought for a moment. Before him the gate rose silently toward the lights above. Can anyone else run the gate? He asked. No, Charlie said, still sadly. I talked to them about that, you know. I said to Saunders, I said, what if I get sick? What if something happens to me? Who's going to run the gate? He rested his fingers on the control board. He said not to worry about it, that it would be okay. Charlie looked up at Griffin. There's another reason, you know, why I think we're maybe in Sumatra or Tahiti. Maybe it's Tahiti, because maybe we don't really need the gate after all, you see. Someone could always send a skiver or a ship. Tahiti, Griffin echoed. Oh yes, or perhaps Tobago, Charlie nodded. I saw the outside once, you know, before they had finished building the station. I went into a sector that wasn't finished, by mistake, he smiled. It's really pretty out there, but I didn't tell anyone. And the workers, you know, they must have sent them home in a skiver or a ship or something. I brought them in through the gate, but... He stopped talking, as though a mainspring inside him had wound down. Griffin touched his shoulder again. Elizabeth Marks, Private Michaels, perhaps the workers who had built this station, Alonzo, Tish, even Charlie Becker, broken on the wheel of somebody's ambitions. He thought he knew whose. He was poised to ask another question when the main door suddenly irised open and Captain Zhorchow strode in, followed by 2 UN guards. Becker yelped, wide-eyed, and scuttled backwards. He put his hands up, sheltering his face, and cringed back against the control panel of the gate. Zhorchow ignored the tech. He marched to Griffin, planted his hands at his hips, and glared. Griffin put his shoulders back. "In case you had forgotten, Private Griffin," Zhorchow said frigidly, "you have an appointment with Colonel Sanders. You are late." "No, I'm not," Griffin replied as coldly as the captain. "I think that I'm probably right on time." Zhorchow moved his head, and the guards flanked Griffin, grabbed his arms, and muscled him out of the room. Behind him, he heard Charlie Becker whimper again. Chapter 42. "I'll bet that really makes you feel big," Griffin said furiously, and his anger felt wonderful. He leaned against the glass side of the lift, crowded against the 2 guards who still held his arms. Captain Zhorchow stared straight ahead. Griffin snorted. "Did you enjoy threatening Becker, or beating him, or whatever you did to that poor little wimp? Do you love the idea that he's a broken man?" Zhorchow ignored him. "Alvarez, hell, he probably wasn't a problem at all, less than Charlie Becker. The man was drugged out after all. Was it even satisfying, Zhorchow? Did you get off on eliminating a wounded man?" Zhorchow's eyelid quivered. "Gad," Griffin thought admiringly, "the man really was made of ice." "How about my buddy Michaels?" Griffin continued. "I'll bet he was more of a challenge, but you don't have a mark on you, so my guess is that you got him while he was sleeping, or had your goons do it for you. That seems more your style, doesn't it, Zhorchow? That way you don't have to mess up that perfect hair." Without changing expression, Zhorchow hit him in the mouth. Griffin's head banged against the side of the lift, and the bright metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. The goons holding him hadn't even moved. The captain stared at his own hand. He had cut it against Griffin's teeth, and it bled a little onto the captain's pristine uniform. "Gotcha," Griffin whispered and smiled. The remnants of a meal were scattered across Saunders' desk. The colonel looked up from a small screen as Zhorchow, Griffin, and his escort walked in, then rose abruptly, his brows drawn together in anger. "What is this?" he demanded. "He resisted," Captain Zhorchow said offhandedly, almost as if he didn't care whether the colonel believed him or not. "Captain, you are on report," Saunders snapped. "You will remain in your billet until I have time for you. You two, dismissed." Zhorchow didn't move for a moment, his face absolutely rigid, then spun about and left, trailed by the 2 guards. Watching them go, Griffin suddenly felt endangered, as though he had been somehow safer with the captain present. He looked at Saunders, who tossed him the napkin from his desk. "Clean yourself up," the colonel ordered. "Zhorchow is a fool, but he doesn't explode without help. I have no sympathy for you." "I haven't asked for any, sir," Griffin replied. The colonel sat and put his hands flat on the surface of his desk. "Private Michaels has been spreading seditious sentiments," Saunders said. "Private Michaels has been deleted," Griffin said. "Can you tell me why?" Saunders ignored him. "Did he ever lead you to believe there might be a problem with the VR augmentation, or that the UN is lying about the nature of our mission here?" Griffin just looked at him. "Have these seditions spread, Private Griffin? Did Michaels talk to anyone other than yourself?" His hands were almost white against the surface of the desk. Griffin looked at them and suddenly wondered why Saunders was even bothering to talk to him. He looked at Saunders' face and read nothing there. "I don't know, sir." "What were you and he doing in central processing last night?" Griffin's shoulders tensed. "We were reviewing our personnel records." There was a moment of silence. "Thank you, Private. That's all I need to know." Saunders' face was cold as ice again. All semblance of friendliness dropped. "You are dismissed." For a moment, Griffin was tempted to let go of his temper and challenge the colonel and demand answers to all the questions about Alvarez and Michaels and Marks, about AJ 3905 and the gate, and everything else. But he kept seeing the sign on Michael's door, the word deleted, and kept his temper in check. If they had done it to Michaels, they could do it to Andrew Griffin, and then he would never know the truth. Chapter 43. He slammed back into his room. The pills Michaels had given him were still lying in plain sight on the counter in his bathroom. He snatched them up and clenched his hand. The pill case cut into his palm. He opened his fist and stared at the 3 white pills resting on his palm. Michaels had been deleted. He got a glass of water from the bathroom, popped the pills out of their packet, and swallowed all of them at once. Weariness hit him with terrifying speed. As he staggered toward his bed, he feared coma or poisoning, and he thought about calling for Dr. Miram. Fear of what might happen if he called for help was more intense still. He was dreaming even before he closed his eyes, images and sounds streaming through his consciousness in wild disorder, like the rushing of a river whose dam is cracked. Michaels was right. Mayadonna suppressed dreams, and the pills were the antidote. But was there an antidote for the dreams? The landscape of his dreams screamed with fear and guilt. A green beast turned its inhumanly calm face towards his and said, 300 cc Mayadonna nitrate delivered daily. He cried out, and it smiled. Jenny's face appeared, as she once was, the clear skin and warm eyes. She said, "We killed our mother." Griffin knew she was talking about the earth itself. He reached for her with longing, and she looked into a distance which roiled with smoke. He heard the sirens and tried to warn her not to go, not to drive that car. Dr. Marks stood beside her, smiling into his eyes, her face alight with a frightening joy. "I want to create," she said, and Jenny's lips moved in the same words. "I want that." She opened her hands in a gesture of longing and acceptance. "I want to have a baby," she said, and Jenny was speaking the same words, but he could not hear her voice. Dr. Marks had created. She had created the quantum gate, and it had brought them all here. Michaels was behind him, saying, "Dr. Marks took a walk." Saunders was everywhere, and his voice said, "All operations are being governed." Jenny opened her mouth again, and a flying bug emerged from her mouth, spread its wings in joyous beauty, then shattered his laser seared. Spread its wings in joyous beauty, then shattered as his laser seared through it. Chapter 44. An alarm blasted through Griffin's unquiet sleep, making his heart race and confusing his still dreaming mind. He opened his eyes. The air roared with the incessant beeping. "What the hell is going on? What is that?" The AP's voice rang through the air. "Level 1 alert. All combat troops to the egress chamber." Griffin rolled from his bunk, amazing at how the training took over. He was dressing even before he was fully awake. "Level 1 alert. Level 1 alert." The door opened in front of him as he almost ran into the entryway, still closing up his shirt. And there he froze, staring at Michael's door. It still said deleted. "Level 1 alert," said the relentless voice of the AP. "All able-bodied troops to the egress chamber." Michaels and Alvarez. His feet took him down the short entryway and out into the hall. "Full-scale assault in progress. All combat troops to the egress chamber." Dr. Marks and Charlie Becker. The lift opened, humming, and he ran into Sergeant Cranshaw. Before he could even formulate the thought, he had grabbed her by the shoulder and dragged her into a niche. She turned, arms already raised for the chop, before she saw his face and froze. "Michaels," Griffin said. "What happened to Michaels?" Her eyes narrowed. Private Michaels' contract was revoked. Revoked? Was Private Michaels killed? Griffin asked. "For God's sake, Sergeant, what did they do to him?" She didn't reply, and Griffin stared in growing horror at her face. "You got rid of him, didn't you?" he whispered. "You did it for them." "I'm a professional soldier," Maria Cranshaw said flatly. "My superiors give me orders, and I follow them. It's my job." "How could you? He was your lover, my God, Sergeant! What did they promise you?" For a moment, it looked as if he might have gotten through to her. "He asked me that too," the sergeant said, and then the military mask clamped down again. "It's a raid, soldier," she said, her voice clipped. "If it were up to me, you'd be confined to quarters, but in case you hadn't noticed, we're a little understaffed right now." They stared at each other for a moment, and then the air between them seemed to crackle with tension. "Go suit up," she finally ordered. "You're a soldier, Griffin, a fighter. It's your job." She pushed him away. Griffin rushed down the hall toward the airlock, pursued by questions, An extinct lily, a million ugly lies, and some even uglier truths. The airlock emergency lights flashed red, and the suits hanging on the walls looked like medieval armor in rows. The door's sign said danger. He felt like giggling for a crazy heartbeat. Then looked down a suit. Beside him, Castle and Hawkins and Cranshaw. Then hooked down a suit. Beside him, Castle and Hawkins and Cranshaw struggled into their own suits, and Hynek babbled a cascade of words that nobody listened to except perhaps for Wayland, who broke her grieving silence. "Shut up, Hynek," she said, and her voice sounded rusty and used up. "Just shut up." Hynek didn't stop. Perhaps he couldn't. "Chamber ready for decompression," said the AP. "Please don VR helmet and activate EnviroSuit." Griffin stepped into the suit and clumsily flattened the seams around him. The seams wriggled like snakes on his body as the suit corrected the fit. He pulled the helmet over his head, and the sound of Hynek's voice cut off abruptly. Where were the workers who built the station? What had they done with Alvarez? And what had they promised Maria Cranshaw to get her to eliminate her lover? And what, he wondered suddenly, would they promise whoever was chosen to kill him? The top hat flickered, then flared into brilliant life. He faced the airlock door, waiting for the cycle to complete. Remove the helmet outside and the self-destruct is activated. Don't you know what the atmosphere does to a man? But the skivers weren't corroded. The dangerous door opened, and he was outside. Outside, standing on AJ-3905's surface. The swirling sky filled his field of vision. Brown searland, rolling hills. All of it familiar from the sim runs, but something seemed missing. The helmet told him Captain Hyomet was in command. His voice came clear in Griffin's ears. "Look, everybody stay on your toes, right? There are bugs everywhere." And that was it, he realized. The bloodlust, the eagerness. It was entirely gone, leaving him standing in the monochrome landscape with no compulsion to kill. He turned slowly. Hawkins and Wayland were facing away from him, but Sergeant Cranshaw's helmet faced him straight on. His suit's alarm spoke. Alien presence, no lock available, danger. A red arrow appeared on his display, pointing left. He turned quickly, but saw nothing. Alien proximity alert, no lock available. Where? Where was it? Warning, foe behind, danger. Please look down, warning. I've got him, I've got him, Maria Cranshaw's voice shouted. And Griffin watched in horror as she raised her rifle and pointed it directly at him. Sarge, no, he yelled. She didn't even slow down. Griffin flung himself sideways, the clumsy suit ruining his balance. He rolled swiftly away. She pursued him, her rifle raised again. He raised his own rifle. Sarge, stop! She took aim, and he sent a beam of red light shooting past her. She leapt to one side. Almost got me, her voice reported calmly. Looks like one of the ground huggers, but the armament is new. Ground huggers? What did she mean? The VR, he realized. He had taken the antidote, so the drug didn't work on him anymore. But it did in Sergeant Cranshaw and the other members of Phoenix Company. And the drug and VR together were telling them that Andrew Griffin was a bug. And if they would lie about that, they would lie about AJ-3905, about chlorine that didn't corrode skivers, about a green paradise so beautiful it leaked through their perverted VR equipment. Even if it wasn't entirely a lie, Griffin thought, it was more than enough evidence for him. He didn't believe them, and it was time to do something about it. He started to reach for his helmet, but Hawkins had found him now. The big man crept around an outcropping of rock, weapon raised and ready. "Ah, jeez, Hawk," Griffin shouted, and rolled quickly away behind a bush. His weapon banged awkwardly against his legs, but he couldn't take the time to stop it. He tore at the fasteners on the helmet. The display's darkness broke into a readout. Life support error, number 120AB, suit environment breached, it said. He tore more furiously at the helmet. Hawkins and Cranshaw had lost him, but it was only a matter of time. Prior to euthanization, said his suit. Oh no, the SD device! The display screen changed. VR damaged, suit breached, 2 injuries. The suit's relentless voice continued. Your employment contract entitles you to make peace with the universe and or God as you perceive he, she, or it. Euthanasia will occur in 15 seconds. No! As he flipped the fasteners open, Cranshaw rose suddenly from the far side of the bush, scanning the area, her weapon ready. He carefully lifted his rifle and centered the targeting image on her. His finger slid onto the trigger as he watched his sergeant search for him. A shining red ball appeared in his helmet display, the numerals 15 wrapped across the surface. Cranshaw seemed to move in slow motion, scanning the area, closer and closer to the slight depression in which he lay. The numbers changed. Tish, Alonzo, Alvarez, Marks, Michaels. The display in his helmet briefly scattered into static colors, then the ball changed. 13. Cranshaw stopped turning. She had spotted him. The muzzle of the rifle swung towards him with dreadful and inexorable slowness. 12. Griffin didn't even hesitate. He killed her. 11. He threw the rifle aside and groped for the helmet clasps. A woman's face flashed into his field of vision like a dream and then vanished. 10. The suit's voice changed. Warning, helmet seal is broken. He tried to pull the helmet off. It stuck. He yanked at the connections again. Suddenly, the helmet was coming off. The helmet's edge cleared his eyes. He looked into the face of a lovely but strangely dressed woman who had soft, curly blonde hair. She was framed by a bright blue sky with clouds, a sky so clear that it looked scrubbed, fresh and clean. The woman's lips moved, but he couldn't hear her words. The air on his face was soft and aromatic, with growing things. A bird sang. Oh my God, Michaels was right. They're human. Lies. All lies. The sane ones lied, and the crazy man told the truth. He had believed the mind and not the heart. Not bugs, but human. How could that be? A voice in his head replayed a part of the orientation lecture, a part he'd heard but had not understood. A quantum gate reached into the parallel reality frequencies surrounding our own. Oh God, no! Becker and De Silva were both right. The gate didn't really transport to a different place, and yet this also wasn't really the same place either. This was Earth, but it was a different Earth, not one destroyed. This was Earth, but it was a different Earth, one not destroyed, or at least not yet destroyed. The woman tugged at his suit. She undid the seals and rolled free of it. He undid the seals and rolled free of it, flinching as something pinched at his side and grew cold. Nearby, Cranshaw's motionless envirosuit lay sprawled across the emerald grass. Griffin looked away from it and saw a helmeted CO suit approaching. From his helmet nearby, he heard Hawkins' voice say, "Cranshaw down, got a bug on her, trying to get a clear shot." He couldn't kill Hawkins. He wouldn't. He looked around desperately, and a heavy object hit him from behind as the rifle flashed. He went down. He was still alive. Would he remain that way? He didn't know. He did know that he wasn't in hiding anymore. As he closed his eyes against the stunning blue of the sky, he smiled. The end. That has been Quantum Gate by Jane E. Hawkins, as read by the Plurality Report for a one-take toilet top audiobook production. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with more. Peace.